Hello and welcome to Ali's House Unlocked. I'm Ali and this podcast is a little window into my world as a childminder and my setting, Ali's House Childcare. In this first episode, I'm going to be speaking briefly about what childminding is, a little bit about what it isn't, and most importantly, I'm going to be talking about my approach, the how and why I do what I do. So if you're a parent, a carer, or an early years practitioner, or somebody who's just curious about early childhood, then you're in exactly the right place. Before we go any further, I need to make really clear what I'm talking about when I say childminder. And what I'm not talking about is babysitting. And what I am talking about is way more than minding children. Many listeners will already understand childminding as a regulated part of the early years sector. But for those who are new to this world, it's really important that we myth bust this idea of childminding as a lesser form of childcare than any other provision. In fact, childminding is quite the opposite, with many childminders being amongst the most progressive and informed and personalised settings to be found in the country. Childminding is a regulated form of early years education and care. We work under the EYFS, the Early Years Foundation Stage Statutory Framework. We're inspected by Ofsted, or for some childminders, Ofsted approved agencies, and we're held to the same standards as nurseries, preschools, etc. But what makes childminding really special is that it happens in a home from home environment, a space that feels warm, familiar, safe, and deeply relational. And now, from our global advances in our knowledge of children's developing brains, we're starting to understand just how valuable those qualities are and how hard they are to replicate in a space that isn't a home. So the presence of childminders is so important to the childcare landscape because it gives families greater flexibility, real diversity of settings, and real choice to find a setting that reflects you and your values, and most importantly, your child. So apologies for waving the flag early on, but it really is important that we protect and raise the profile of the childminders in this country. For me, childminding is the best career decision I ever made. It aligns with my values far more than mainstream education ever did, and it aligns with my passion for protecting childhood and with my belief that early education is not about pushing and rushing and ticking boxes. It's about little human beings growing from a place of joy. And that brings me on to Ali's House Childcare, my childminding setting, which is what I'm supposed to be talking about. So I promised to talk about my approach, the how and why I do what I do. And I've really tried to boil this down in a way that's simple to communicate, but also encapsulates the depth of knowledge that my approach is built on. And what I came up with are my 5 C's. The 5 C's being connection, cup filling, curiosity, consistent skills, and creativity. And I think of those as concentric circles, rippling out from a central point, each layer supporting and becoming a catalyst for the next. So in the very center, the innermost circle, the foundation of everything I do is connection, the first C. And then the layers ripple outwards to the outermost circle, which is creativity. So let's walk through each of those layers together and unpick them. So number 1, connection. Connection is the most important thing I do for both children and families. Before children can learn, explore, grow, they need to feel safe, emotionally, physically, and psychologically safe. At Ali's House, connection means building secure and trusting relationships and fostering a sense of belonging for both children and their families. That feeling of being genuinely valued and seen as a family, that's what I'm aiming for. And one of the ways I do that is through an extensive settling in process, which embraces the child and their family as part of the Ali's House community well in advance of when they're actually starting at Ali's House. As the saying goes, it takes a village to raise a child, and I absolutely become part of that family's village. The word connection also encapsulates the ideas of attachment and respectful caregiving, and I'm inspired by practitioners such as Magda Gerber, and that understanding that children deserve to be treated with dignity and empathy and respect from the very beginning. So in other words, there's no, well, they're just a baby, so it doesn't matter. They won't remember. Yes, they are a baby, and their world absolutely matters entirely. Because when children feel connection, regardless of their age or stage, their nervous systems can relax, creating a freer and more present mind with which to learn. And until we feel safe and connected and protected and valued by the people around us, both mentally and physiologically, then learning simply can't happen that effectively. And as a side note, connection isn't just a one-off activity that I do at the beginning when a child starts Ali's House, or I do at the beginning of the year as an opening topic. Connection is something that we build day in, day out, in every interaction, every nappy change, every mealtime, every shared moment. And a child-minding family home cannot be rivaled for that, as the most humanizing environment that is conducive to connection, far more than a classroom, just to drop that in there. Okay, so connection is our innermost circle at the heart of everything I do. And then once we've got some connection going on, we can move to the next layer, which is cup filling. And you're probably thinking, what on earth is cup filling? At Ali's House, I use something called the Phoenix Cups framework, which was created by Sandy Phoenix. And I can't go into all the theory and do it justice now, but do have a look if you're interested, because it's an incredible piece of work. But very simply, the Phoenix Cups framework is an analogy for understanding human life needs for both children and adults, our well-being needs, if you like, and understanding children's behaviour as their best response to fulfilling their human needs, their well-being needs, or their cups as we envisage them. So every child and adult has well-being needs, what we can think of as cups that need to be filled in order for us to meet our potential. And those needs, those cups, are our need for safety, our need for connection, as we've already talked about, our need for fun, needs for freedom, to feel like we have choice and control over our destiny, and our need for mastery, to feel like we can achieve and can do stuff. And everything we do in a day at Ali's House should aim to fill our cups, not empty them. So at Ali's House, I build responsive and inclusive routines that are based on an understanding of each individual child's cups, and also in response to my own cups and my own well-being needs, because we exist as a community, and so our well-being impacts each other. So in a regular day at Ali's House, I'm mindful of things like how we transition between activities, the type of environments we access beyond my setting, how we rest, how we nap, how we eat, play, learn. And I'm constantly asking myself, is this filling everybody's cups for safety, for example, for mastery? Is this filling one person's cup but depleting another person's cup? And so on. It's certainly not easy, because it requires high levels of reflection and response in the moment. And it's hard to balance everybody's well-being needs at one time. But this is where my other inspiration of slow pedagogy is so valuable, because essentially I make time in the day to notice what children need today, to notice their cups, which cup is running on empty. And in allowing space for that understanding, I can be empathetic towards the behaviours that are demonstrated when someone's cup is feeling pretty depleted. Understanding that behaviour as communication of an unmet need, which then informs how I respond. And that doesn't mean that I'm therefore permissive of all behaviour, but it does mean that I can act with compassion, with clarity and consistency, rather than reactivity. And the aim of all this, of course, is that when children's cups are full or balanced and their well-being needs are being consistently met, then children are available to concentrate on the things that we want them to concentrate on. They can be emotionally available to experience awe and wonder, and they can experience joy. And joy sits at the heart of the best kind of learning, and is joy not just the end goal of anything that we want for our children. So moving on to the next layer now. When children are feeling connected, their cups are balanced, their needs are being consistently met, then something wonderful happens. They begin to explore with increasing independence and confidence, and this curiosity naturally emerges. And that's the next layer of my circles model, curiosity. At Ali's house, children are drivers of their own learning. That means I follow their interests, their fascinations, the questions that emerge from their curiosity. Sometimes following their interests looks obvious. So they might be really interested in dinosaurs, animals, a particular story or event. But a lot of the time, it's deeper than that, especially as I often work with children that are pre-verbal. So I need to observe play on a deeper level to spot schemas, for example. Schemas are repeated, purposeful patterns of behaviour in play that children utilise to understand the world around them. So some examples might be an interest in enclosure, in enclosing and wrapping objects, or a trajectory interest in movement, those children that love to throw and roll. It could be an interest in transporting objects, that child who's forever taking toys out of one box and putting them into a different place, maybe where you didn't want them, and filling and emptying, those kinds of interests. So I observe closely, I listen carefully, and I allow that curiosity to grow rather than steering it prematurely because I've got a certain topic in mind that I want to cover. And yes, there are times when I will introduce new things to the children, such as global festivals, for example, like Lunar New Year or Holi, which I'm a little late, but I'm very much looking forward to celebrating soon. And I carefully introduce those things with the children's interests in mind so that I can use my knowledge of the way that children love to learn to make those new ideas appealing. So in that way, I'm broadening their horizons and extending their learning beyond their immediate reality and building on their cultural capital. Okay, moving out another layer now. So as children are expressing their curiosity and their interests, I begin to gently layer in consistent skills. And this is where deep observation really matters. So let's say our child is fascinated by rolling objects down a ramp. Now that interest becomes an opportunity to build skills. And those skills will depend on the child's age, stage, and next steps. So for one child, I might use this simply to build their attention and listening. So it might be holding the ball at the top of the ramp and doing a ready, steady, go. But for another child, it might be building in counting language, for example, 1, 2, 3, go, or 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. Whereas another child, there might be a social element and playing with a mutual resource, so supporting that turn-taking and those social interactions through my interest. For another child whose next step maybe is a physical development next step, such as accessing bigger equipment, accessing climbing apparatus, we might take that interest outside to the park beyond the setting, and we might start to use the slides as ramps, so encouraging and motivating that child to engage in those bigger bits of apparatus, to practice going up those steps, to get to the top of the ramp, to roll the ball down the ramp. And we repeat, because we're not just ticking a box and moving on, we're developing consistent skills. And that skills-based learning is embedded in play, not imposed on top of it. And by returning to those moments, to those experiences again and again, children develop those reliable, transferable skills, the kind that will support their learning far beyond the early years. And finally, we reach our outermost layer, which is creativity. Now, creativity isn't just arts and crafts. I'm talking about creative thinking. It's imagination, problem solving, making connections between ideas, seeing possibilities and thinking outside of my immediate reality, outside of the box. Creativity is the skill that we need our future generations to have. So when our children have secure relationships, balanced cups, curiosity, and core strong skills, then they can step outside of their comfort zone and imagine, create, have their own ideas and follow those ideas. And then one day in the future, having their own ideas and following them will lead to actually affecting change on the world around them. And if we can value and maintain and grow those skills throughout childhood, then our children will become adults with the mindset and ability to build the life that they want to live in a world that they want to live in. And it starts in the early years. It starts with how we value childhood and with us placing importance on the how and why we do what we do when we're raising our children. Now, before I wrap up, I just want to touch on the 2 pillars, my 2 P's that sit alongside everything I do and without which it would all pretty much crumble. So the first pillar, the first P, is play, which I've referred to a lot. Play is not something that we do to fill our time and burn off some energy. Play is the vehicle for learning. And I could make a whole other episode on why play is intrinsically valuable, and we don't have to stick the word learning in it to make it valuable. And I probably will do. But for now, I'm going to call play the vehicle for learning because that's one important part, and it helps us all to understand the importance of play and why it's inseparable from the early years. Through play, children develop their bodies, their hearts, their minds. Play builds the holistic child. So yes, we play all day because play is the most important thing that a child needs to do. And my other P, the other pillar, is parent partnership. Because everything that happens at Ali's house does not happen in isolation. Parents are a child's primary educator, and my role is to work with families, to support, sometimes to advise, to listen, and to learn from you as much as you learn from me. It's an ongoing conversation, a shared understanding, and a partnership built on trust. Together we create the holistic world in which every child can truly thrive, and I mean every child. So that's Ali's house in a rather long and babbling nutshell. It's a place that's built on connection, on well-being, on curiosity, skills building and creativity. It's a place where play is valued, where families are respected and children are deeply known. And going back to the point which I raised at the beginning of this episode, this is childminding. And to use the DFE's favourite phrase at the moment, this is the best start in life. So thank you very much for listening to my first episode of Ali's House Unlocked. If you want to join the conversation, do get in touch, and I hope that you'll be listening again soon. But until next time, take care and bye-bye.